Yo, before we get into today's video, let me just make you aware that I sound a little bit like an alien in this video. I'm not sure why. I was having like weird mic issues. I had to refresh everything, and then I did it, and now I sound like an alien. So it works. The sound still works. I just sound a little bit crazy. So you know what I mean? I think it fits. It fits the aura. My arm's hurting a little bit, so it's kind of like, all right, let's just sound like an alien or something. I don't know. I don't know how those two things go together, but that's what happens in this video. So hopefully you still enjoy. I apologize.
Day we're here. Day 3 of OTAs is officially happened, which means it's our first opportunity to hear from the media what the Detroit Lions look like. I think it's our first opportunity I guess we had rookie minicamp, so we got like a little bit from that. But as a whole, this is the first opportunity kind of hearing anything about what the 2025 Detroit Lions are going to look like. Now, we're still super early in the process. As Dan pointed out, hey, it's still May. It's still May. Now, I think he put that in a different context, but it is still May. But anyways, we do have some notes. I gathered these from a few different sources. We'll shout out those sources as we go through this, through kind of what the takeaways were from a few different sources. A lot of things were overlapping, so I think that's good. You know, we kind of have an idea, like everybody was kind of seeing similar things to this. But also, we got to hear from Dan Campbell this morning, and he had his presser, which I feel like it's been a long time since we heard from Dan. I don't know if that's true or not, but I was like, hey, when's the last time we heard from Dan Campbell? And he had a few nuggets in there, a few little things to kind of grab onto that I think are important. First thing would be kind of the contract situations, because there's a few different contract situations the Lions, there's question marks about, right? Alex Anzalone being the biggest one. People will question the Aiden Hutchinson one. I don't really have questions about that one. You also look at the rookie deals, guys not signing deals, or it's taking a little bit longer, even though, you know, these all happen at different times, but there's some like legitimate reasons for that this offseason. Tate Ratledge, for example, has not signed his rookie contract as of now, but Dan Campbell, he didn't go into like a specific player or something like that, but he did say that, you know, it's good because he has those conversations, things that he says to them, he won't say to the media or anything like that, like affecting training camp or affecting down the line. I think that's specifically why he brought up the fact of, hey, it's only May. All right, we got a long time before this thing really kicks off here. So he's not worried about that. He also said that he wasn't worried about anything when it came to really how the whole schedule lines up for the Lions. Not just like the regular season schedule, as difficult as it is. You open with a couple of divisional games. Someone pointed out in my chat yesterday, which was great, I think it was Steven, that he said that, hey, look, the Lions have a lot more outdoor games than they had last year, right? Way less dome games they had last season. So you could throw that into it, but also just the whole program, like the Lions playing the first preseason game. They play at the end of July. We're essentially a month away from seeing the Lions play, but they get an extra preseason game because of that. Says that it's perfect because he thinks the Lions are essentially going to be hardened the way that they need to be for the playoffs. You know, if they get there, when they get there, that they'll be in a spot where like it's perfect. And I think that for him, he said everything's perfect. I think for him, it's just the mentality that he takes to everything. He won't ever give you a different answer, I think, than that. That's his mentality. It's a great mentality to have. But I also like when he turns it around, he talks about how, you know, making sure that the veterans speak with the young guys on the importance of like, hey, when you get this opportunity, you know, you got to take advantage of it because you don't know if you're ever going to get back. Like the playoff games are precious is essentially what he said. And we heard this like after we lost to the Niners. He's like, I don't know if we'll ever get back, you know, that kind of thing. And it was like, wait a minute, what the heck? If we don't ever get back, we got to get back. And they end up getting back. Now that to that game, they got back to the playoffs, even a better record, got the 1 seed. But he's right, nothing's guaranteed. And then he even said kind of the same thing about, you know, injuries. He's like, we can't do a dang thing. Essentially is what he said about injuries. He hits the offense this year. I didn't love that he said that, but he said, you know, we just have to essentially adapt to it. He talked about Aiden Hutchinson. He talked about Marcus Davenport. Both of those guys looking good. I feel like they had a lot of depth, and he kind of went through different positional groups, talking about the versatility in the safety room, guys that can cover in the linebacker room, guys that can rush the passer in the linebacker room. He's kind of just hitting different positional groups. I do think from a numbers perspective, I've said this before, but the defensive line, I think in my opinion, has 7 locks. And I don't know how that compares in the past, but like 7 legitimate guys in sense of not just locks to make the roster, but guys that can impact both the run and the pass. And I think I've proven that outside of Tyleik Williams, but we'll throw him into that category as a first-round pick. I think the Lions are kind of at that spot. That's really strong depth across the front. I feel like spots like that, like you do like the depth. And of course, he was asked about the pass rush, and you know, his answer was essentially like, we can't really gauge anything from what we've seen so far in terms of pass rush. He's like, you know, we tried to set up that double post shot that we hit to Sam Laporta, which he was adamant was a catch. He's like, yeah, toe tap, you know, the toe, because Lions did cut it off. He said toe drag 34 yards on the sideline. It was a beautiful ball. But he brought that up as like, okay, we're setting that up. We had the front walking through, right? So we may not be able to get that off if there's defense line pressure. So essentially just kind of like, you know, there's not really that much we can gather from this. Those kind of things, we'll get a lot more sense of where we're at in terms of training camp there. But in some of the notes today, we did get some notes from the defensive line perspective, and specifically on guys like Aiden Hutchinson, who one common theme across the board was Aiden Hutchinson looks good. You know, the guy looks healthy. He looks explosive. Every media person that I've read said that same thing. And also Dan Campbell said that as well, that Hutch looks good. He's got a bend to him. He's playing confident. I think that's the big thing. Those are the 2 big things for me. Seeing him bend, I brought that up before, like that kind of was like, whoa, that looks weird. Like it just sounds crazy. Like you had the broken leg and all of a sudden you're bending on the edge. It's crazy. But he said he's also looking confident, and that's great. Like we know he's got the do-rag going. The dude's confident. So as long as you're not thinking about it, don't have veteran mini camp because of kind of the short nature of it, but having 2 OTAs. So we have 3 next week, 3 days of OTAs next week. I'm going to throw some nuggets in there, like defensively, saying that, a lot more defensively, schematically speaking, for a Kelvin Shepard defense, who is apparently super vocal today in practice. What it's going to be is more freedom defensively. That's kind of the idea of how they want it to be, more freedom in terms of what the look is. And I think defense is definitely a spot to do that. Defense could be much more reactionary in that sense. What do they come out in? What motions do you have pre-snap? Can you rip Liz your safeties? Doing things like that. Like Dan Jackson would do that back in college, rip Liz with Georgia. So having that flexibility to adapt on the fly. And we've also talked about this with the front seven, where we've talked about if you have guys that a lot of them have similar body types, a lot of similar skill sets, where you can bump down the line. You don't have to ask guys to flip. You could, but maybe you don't have to. You can ask guys to just kind of shift on the front. Like all of a sudden, Aleem, let's just use him because he's an easy example, though he won't, be here right away. It's like a guy like that can go from, hey, I'm outside of a guard, but I can shift in, play a 2-eye, and all of a sudden I'm essentially your nose tackle on this play. So you have the flexibility to do things like that up front with the personnel you have. Barnes can play off ball. Alice can step on the ball. You have that. But then in the back end, we've had guys who've been a part of it, but it's also now have at least returning players here, like across the board. And DJ Reed is a veteran. So you have that. And that's kind of what they're aiming for. The safety position, I think, is going to be the anchor of all of that movement, is that you have the versatility to do it. You have the flexibility to that, ask guys to play man, play in the box, also play deep safety. But then you also have the aspect of those players are 2 of your best players on this team. So leaning into that makes sense. A lot of times the safeties, they have a lot of communication responsibilities pre-snap. And then, of course, Jack Campbell, who's holding it down now, he's going into his 3rd year with the Lions, and last year was a breakout season. So it makes a ton of sense. That's what they would look to do. And then offensively, you kind of just threw in there like having control of the offense for Jared Goff. So listed every player that was essentially going to be like limited or not participating today. And I wrote down 15. It wasn't 15, I don't think, just as a random number, because he named that many players. He also named Calvin Johnson, Chris Spielman twice. Chris Spielman is apparently not participating twice. That's crazy word, Chris. And then also he named Calvin Johnson. So to be smart with these guys, right? So bumps and bruises, be smart with them. And number 2, a lot of them he pointed to being rookies. And for those guys, how fast of a turnaround this is. You go through that offseason process, you get drafted, now you're right back into it. Some seasons just kind of align that way where that's not a huge break. As Dan pointed out, it's the 7th week kind of in the offseason with these guys. But, I mean, it just feels like yesterday we had the draft and they're preparing for the draft. It's a quick turnaround. But the players that he listed, I'm going to read through them very fast here, shout out to Pride of Detroit for this list, Miles Adams, Roderick Martin, Aleem McNeil, Levi Onwuzurike, Josh Pascal, DJ Reader, Tyleik Williams, Mekhi Wingo, Derek Barnes, Jack Campbell, Malcolm Rodriguez, Terriana Arnold, Brian Branch, Cleo Dorsey, Gavin Holmes, Miles Frazier, Kenny Yeboah, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Isaac Tesla, David Montgomery, and Sione Vaki. That's who he named. That's a lot of players, limited or out of participation today. So I guess we'll get more details on that here when we get to the notes from what today held. There's a couple different sources. We got the Free Press in here. Shout out to the Free Press. Pride of Detroit. Shout out to the Pride of Detroit. They get their stuff. I always love reading their stuff. And then we also have 20man who's working with the Detroit Lions. He works with the Lions, yeah. So we have notes from all those guys. A lot of these things became overlapping. Let's get right into it. So starting off, go right here with the running back position. So no Sione Vaki today. And as Pride of Detroit pointed out, that there was a lot of Kai Robichaud, the Boston College undrafted free agent. I have went back recently, watched a little bit more Kai Robichaud. I mean, he was in a 2-back offense, right? So he was very rotational, but he was a pretty big part of that pass game in terms of what they asked of him. Like the route tree was a little bit diverse, right? They would split those guys out wide, but they just rotated those guys. But I always thought he worked pretty well in traffic because his legs would keep moving in traffic. I think I had like knocks on him in terms of vision. We'll see how that shakes out. But it sounds like he's getting a lot of reps in the pass game, especially without Vaki today. Meanwhile, Gibbs and you have Craig Reynolds holding it down as kind of the starting backs. But they also said that Gibbs, being experimented, I guess, with in some ways in terms of the variety of ways that they're using him as a pass catcher, that's the thing. That's like music to my ears. Every time I hear that, I get pumped up. You guys know how much I'm on the bandwagon of, man, get this guy in the passing game. I even put a little highlight like montage together of plays from 2014. I want to make it clear, if you've seen that video when Joe Lombardi was the Lions offensive coordinator, he went to Denver. Well, he didn't then go to Denver, but he was with Denver the past couple of seasons. John Morton, of course, was there this past season as their offensive coordinator under Sean Payton. Obviously, we've grabbed from that tree. But the big thing there is it wasn't as much as like, oh, how productive was the Lions offense? That's not what I was trying to show. I was more so showing the style of what it looks like and how some of the stylistic things like we've seen before, like keeping some of those things carried over from what worked this past season. But the big thing for me there is I always had issues in the past, and I don't I didn't get into it like I do now, but I did think at times in the past like they weren't using Stafford right. I didn't like how they were doing things stylistically, trying to limit his turnovers. It's like, yeah, you got to live with that. Stafford's going to turn the ball over, but he'll make some big plays. That's kind of his thing. But for Goff, I do think that that stylistic of an offense, it actually fits perfectly. It's his game. He's going to make those quick decisions, and then you can kind of read it pre-snap, figure out where your alignments are, kind of base it on that, and then you just make quick decisions, get the ball to your hands, let everybody just do work after the catch. And then even on the shot plays, the ball's out faster, right? You don't have to just hold on to the ball forever. But usually, that being said, though, that was kind of why I put that out there, just to give an idea of like, okay, we could see, kind of this before, and we've seen it before as fans, and I think it fits this style. But the idea of like a running back being involved in the passing game, I brought up David Shaw, how involved he was with Christian McCaffrey, of course, there at Stanford. But we even showed a play in that clip, put the running back in the slot on 3-by-1 side, which Shaw does a lot, and they ran that bubble screen. And that's like the things that I want to see Gibbs used for. I don't want to see us limit Jahmyr Gibbs, because Gibbs was the breakout last year in terms of the pass game for 500 receiving yards. I think it changed everything. And I think down the stretch, you see how productive he was game after game after game. And then on top of that, he's such a difficult matchup, because to me, it's not about like one-on-one. It's what it does to everybody else. When you know that he's a factor, what it does to everybody else, what coverages it force, what hand you have to tip as a defense to deal with that guy. That's where I think Gibbs can be so impactful. And we saw like one highlight today of Jahmyr Gibbs making an over-the-shoulder grab, taking off towards the end zone. However they want to do it, I just want to make sure that guy's still involved in the pass game. And I wonder a little bit if Kai is making some noise there. But obviously, Vaki is really good at that as well when he gets back out there. Like, we'll go to Tim Twentyman. They talked about how they were 7-on-7s at the end of practice. And it was essentially, from what I gathered, a series of 6 plays that were 3rd and 5 situations. I think that's what they did twice. And in these 7-on-7s, Goff, the first time around, went 2 for 6. Not great the first time around. They said B. Joseph and Ennis Rakestraw nearly had interceptions in those drills, so the connection wasn't consistent there. And then the second time around they did it, Goff went 5 for 6 against the first team defense. Khalif had 2 first downs. Sam Laporta had a first down. Jameson Williams had a first down, as well as Craig Reynolds having a first down, which speaks to him playing on those downs too. By the way, speaking of pass game running backs, I know I brought this up many times, but at cuts down, that dude could catch the football. Or we got dudes that can catch the ball. Even Monty catches the ball really well. But across the board there, it sounds like it got better offensively. It sounds like Laporta continues to eat. That's what I've heard across the board all these 3 days, and we keep seeing clips of him, which is fantastic. And Jameson Williams apparently has put on 5 pounds of muscle. Now, I am great with that. It's one thing to just put on weight. It's another thing to transition, fat into muscle. That's fantastic. But also on top of that too is like, I don't want JMO necessarily bulk up. Like I'm cool with the skinny JMO that's like, oh, he looks kind of weird. There's a lot of air between those sleeves when he's wearing long sleeves. It's like, I'm good with it. Now, I can't understand why you want to bulk up a little bit, get a little stronger, but not necessarily that I want to like thicker where he's like slowing himself down. Like, he's so dynamic there. And as Dan Campbell talked about with Jameson Williams, like, his ability to now stop and start. He's like a guy with that kind of juice, but that can stop and start. The versatility we have on the outside, right? We can use him on the inside, but on the outside, the routes that we can run with him putting on a little bit more muscle, I think helps. So I was obviously dealing with some physicality. If some teams want to throw that at you as well, he can be used inside and outside, as we know. But he talked about the versatility there. Like, we can expand that route tree. I think last season we saw the Lions go in a different direction some ways with that route tree, finding a way to have him on a lot of speed routes. I found a lot of success. Remember, the speed outs started to become a thing. A lot of over-breaking routes, found success. He has gotten much better working in the middle of the field. He's been taking shots over the middle, which has been fantastic. We got him on some deep posts last year. His game, to me, was never great at like the deep comeback routes and things like that. And I remember we did the breakdown on JMO, I think before last season, and those were some of the knocks that I had, like settling in, getting in and out of breaks, snapping out of those things, how slow it was, maybe not separating the way that you want to. It's like, maybe we shouldn't do this thing. But if Dan Campbell's like alluding to things like that, where that's getting better, he's becoming one of the more well-rounded receivers. And we know every coach is talking about him like he could be breaking out this year. I do believe he will break out this year, just because I think the offense is going to feature him a ton. But on top of that as well is, like, the clips look good. We know that he can roll, and if you put on a little muscle, that doesn't hurt. Continuing on with this, they talked about the tight end position, and the one guy perhaps Detroit gave some love to was Shane Zylstra. Really made a sliding grab today. Shane is another guy that I think can be a king of the offseason workouts, and I don't say that as a slight. I think it's a great thing. You got to shine somewhere. 2 years ago, he had 11 receptions. Last season, he had 1, right? Last season, his snaps cut way back. He played less than 50 snaps, pass down snaps. I think that if you look at the Shane Zylstra situation, what makes him so interesting, and I remember going back to free agency about this, and it reminded me, like, tight ends in free agency were bare. Like, there wasn't much talent out there. Whenever Ingram got let go, that was massive, and it was like, oh, man, that's a dog. And I like Evan Ingram a lot. Michael Rodriguez played a really good game against him, by the way. But he signed some legitimate money this offseason. There just wasn't a lot of dudes in tight end market. So Lions went Kenny Yeboah, kind of an unproven piece, especially in the passing game. But, they probably like a lot of the traits to that as well. And then he can block and he can move, block those things. But Shane Zylstra, getting him back to me could be very sneaky, because he didn't have himself in a spot where it's like, oh, he's going to outprice the Lions. But he's been productive here before. I always felt that he's had a good connection with Jared Goff when he's been on the field, just about being on the field. He missed the entire 2023 season. So I don't know if I pointed that out, but there was that gap there. He missed the entire 2023, unfortunately, due to an injury during these offseason workouts. But Shane Zylstra is one of those dudes, man, that he could be sneaky because he could be outproduce a lot of the tight ends that were actually available on the market. In a market that was very bare. I mean, you would have had to go to the draft round. Obviously, the Lions didn't really do that. I know that he can separate. And I felt last year in the preseason, he got better as a blocker. Laporta and Goff, apparently that connection was money, as it sounds like it's been. And especially without Sam Brown, he's kind of just leaned to Sam Laporta, which I don't know if this is like every year, with these guys that are like, okay, this guy's on the rise. He's getting better. It feels like when we go through these workouts, continue to see the name pop up, and it gets to the point where it's like, okay, we get it. Like, we don't even need to talk about that. Like St. Brown has gotten to the point where it's like, all right, he was great. Like, there's not much else to say. Like, we were at training camp. He had 6 receptions. He cooked everybody. He was great. He got, he's jumping over dudes one-on-ones. And it's like, ever since he broke out, this guy has continued just dominance. And we hear this, and you're like, oh, maybe spread the ball around a little bit. It's kind of cool. Now Laporta's in that seat where it feels like now, at least early on, it's like, okay, well, Laporta's actually taking off right now. And it's like, yeah, that dude they have a connection. And I think a good guy to throw into that is Tim Patrick, because it sounded like Tim Patrick had a great day. Tim Patrick, we saw the one-handed highlight underneath. We know he could separate there. But Tim Patrick's another guy that was super interesting because the Lions had been going through that rotation of after preseason, let's find a receiver. They added Patrick last year after the offseason essentially was over at the end of August, and he was really good for us when he eventually got onto the field, got activated to the active roster. But the thing about Tim Patrick, too, is like not only is he a talented receiver, but you're going into this situation where he already showed that he had a great connection with Goff immediately. Like, he built that immediately.
And I really say this as a comparison. Like, in the past, Josh Reynolds, you felt the immediate connection, but there was already a connection there. But guys like Allen Robinson, Trinity Benson off the trade, Rashad Perriman, there were certain guys that just didn't feel the consistency in terms of production. They may flash, but he didn't feel the consistency. Tim Patrick didn't even have that, and he was immediately productive when he got on the field for us. And I think that obviously the connection of him and the John Moran offense, which he's already been a part of, just gives you even more excitement for this guy fits perfectly.
This consistency. It's not like things are all over the place. It's like these are the guys that you expect to be really good, especially with offensive changes that we're going to wonder about. And they are really good still. Tim Patrick is also, I think, an ideal fit for this offense. Like, this dude is very agile. I think he can be hit and miss separating downfield. He can win vertically. We saw a ridiculous one-on-one grab this past season. He can run, too. Does things after the catch. And in this offense, where you're getting the ball in your hands, letting guys do things after the catch, Tim Patrick feels like an amazing fit for this. And just getting him back at the time was so, like, calming, and then the Lions just bolstered that with some draft picks, which, speaking of that, Dominic Lovett sounds like he's just flashing all over the place when he's working because there's no contact in the back end, so he's working through these, not 11 on 11s, but he's just shaking everybody. That, again, if you watch Dominic Lovett, like we did the video on him, we went through every game from 2024. I went through every game. I don't think there was a game where I was like, oh, he's not cooking everybody. Like, there was moments where he didn't. There was detailed things that I didn't love, but the aspect of just being able to create space, to shake guys, the juice, like, all of that was present every game. And there were some games where you're like, oh my goodness, I literally don't think they have a guy that can cover this dude. It got to that point. It was just about rounding out the rest of his game so he's as dominant as you'd expect for a guy that can separate that much. Again, earlier at Georgia, it was just a lot of underneath stuff. A spot where they're going to need a lot of the details polished, and that's what they're working towards. But similar to Khalif Raymond, like, this guy has all the makings. I mean, if you're just looking at from traits, the guys that can separate, Dominic Lovett separated all the time in college against very good players. Just throwing that out there. Lovett is, I'm getting excited about this, dude, because they all said that he was, kind of a backup like gunner. I think that he could play gunner. Offensive line, the only real thing here is that they gave us is kind of the rotations of the offensive line, but that's what you would expect. That's the fun part. Apparently, Tate Ratledge worked a lot at center. Now, Tim Twentyman said that he rotated at right guard and center with Graham Glasgow, and that also KO'd got some looks with the first team at right guard, and that meant Christian Mahogany pretty much held it down at left guard. Others said that he was just kind of only center. Regardless, and that's without Frank Ragnow, so it makes sense. I don't need to keep beating this drum, but I do feel like that this is going to be the future for Tate Ratledge. And at very least, when you hear the flip side of like, okay, Colby Sorso got a shot, didn't look great. I think that was Tim Twentyman that said that, and then they kind of got away from it. It makes me think that Tate Ratledge looks pretty good there, and that the Lions are invested in the fact that, like, yeah, this guy legitimately could be this. Again, I still am going to hang my hat on that 3 years, 2 years down the road, we're going to be like, Tate Ratledge is the Lions center. Like, I still think that's going to happen. But again, it doesn't have a year one. It's best 5 on the field, regardless of what that is. But I think down the road, that's a huge reason why the Lions selected him. Beyond that, Manu holding it down at left tackle, Skipper at right tackle, which is interesting because Skipper has held it down at backup left tackle for us. Promising for Manu if he can really kind of carve out a consistent role there because, we've had, like, Jamarco Jones was competing last season. He was brought back by the Lions, really only played one game, but he played pretty well in that game. You saw some issues, but he played one game. You also have Colby Sorso, who sounds like he's not with the second team then, and he went to back the tackle, but Manu holding it down at left tackle. Manu had a strong preseason.
I mean, essentially, he was just attacked by speed rushers. But what I did like is the recovery, the balance. You saw the movement skills as his own blocker, get out of the ball, snap pretty quickly.
He showed some legitimate real issues, but they said that they talked really highly about him through the season on his progress. But Manu showed like, all right, he's an athlete. He can kind of move around, do different things. You can get him in pass pro, and he does a lot of good in pass pro. We just need to really clean up like his hand usage. We got to dial in some things for real here. But he did take steps as the preseason went on. It wasn't like you walked away like, this guy is horrendous. We have no hope. That's not what you felt like with Manu. So that gives me some excitement too. Third string center was Michael Neese and Kingsley Egokon, and that's where we got some snaps apparently from Colby to just kind of see what it looked like. I guess it was a low snap, so they took him out of it. I don't know if that's the reason why, but that's, apparently what happened is he had a low snap. That's probably going to be a work in progress if he hasn't been doing that, getting snaps, getting off the ball quickly. I do think Colby at center is interesting because size-wise, he's not really a mauler, but he does really well with angles, and he moves really well. I could see a path where, like, if you allow him to continue to compete there, where it could be a fun competition. I mean, I don't see why not. He's already in a tough spot to make the team from what we're looking at just from numbers-wise. And if you're going to have Kingsley and Neese, who made the team last year, competing, if there is any possibility of one of those guys getting in the roster, why not have Colby at least get a shot there? If it looks horrible, though, obviously you don't want to take reps away from the other guys just because you drafted him. But I don't see why not. And I would continue to look into that. Davenport apparently batted a pass down today. Hutchinson looks strong. He looks explosive. The free press said it. Everybody was saying it. Hutch looks good. Campbell said it. He looked good. So that's great. I'm happy that he looks good. Tim Twentyman said he had a few good pass rushes. Pat O'Connor, I guess, would have had a sack today. Now, remember, Pat O'Connor played 230 snaps this past season. That's 2 times more than he's played at any point in the past. But he also has a connection back to Casey Rogers. He was with Tampa Bay with Casey Rogers to get things started. And Pat O'Connor, I went back recently and I had watched a little bit of Pat O'Connor. I can't remember what for, but like the Minnesota game, I thought he took a big step forward. It was like really good reps in there. Not a great offensive line. We watched him against the run. You're like, he's actually kind of holding his own on the inside. Like, it's not awful. There's some good reps in here. Some are great, but some are good. Then you go to like Green Bay earlier and it's like, oh, this is kind of rough. But from week 14 on, he was a legitimate part of this defense, about 30 snaps a game. He had 7 pressures in that span. So his ability to get off the ball was always a problem on the inside to get pressure. He did against Green Bay over and over and over, and it sounds like that's what he did again today. So that's a great guy to practice against, a guy that just flies off the ball. You got to be ready. You got to deal with that, especially for guys like Sorsel. If he does get reps at center, like deal with him immediately off the ball. See if you can deal with that. Sounds like there was some love given to a couple guys by Jack Campbell, Chris Smith, and also to Ennis Rakestraw. But on the interior, I guess the starting D tackles with the guys that they have out, Liam Levi, Mekhi Wingo, those guys, and DJ Reader, was Roy Lopez and it was Chris Smith. Those were the guys getting the ones reps. Now, Roy Lopez doesn't surprise me. It speaks, I think, volumes that those guys can play together, because what intrigues me about that is Chris Smith didn't really flash a ton of flexibility last year. He kind of lived between the guards or inside the guards, and he was that. He wasn't really much of a pass rush piece. He didn't play a ton. He played about 50 snaps, but he only had 1 pressure on the year. That wasn't his game. He was just consistently where he was supposed to be. He typically held his gap pretty well. He had some integrity there. But Roy Lopez, I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if what's happening here is Roy Lopez is showing the flexibility to be like, I can go outside of a guard. I can make an impact there. I can feel comfortable moving up and down the line. And this is exactly the point that I was saying earlier about the defensive front's flexibility. If you can have Chris Smith and Roy Lopez on the field together and feel comfortable with that, that speaks a lot to flexibility. Now, maybe Chris Smith is in this game. Let me not overlook that. But it does speak a lot to, like, okay, you got guys that can move. Like, obviously, Broderick Martin, you're not going to move him much. You kind of know what his role is, and we'll have to just wait till training camp to see more of what that's going to look like. But there is multiple guys that do have that. And one of the traits for Roy Lopez is that ability. And I feel like if you go back to the Casey Rogers defense lines he's always had a really good backup nose tackle. They've always had a role-playing nose tackle. And Chris Smith was essentially that last season for us. Right, it was about 10, 15 snaps a game. You knew what you're going to get. You weren't going to get much playmaking. You knew what you're going to get, right? More so consistency than Broderick Martin, you could say at the time. But his role was relatively similar. But now you have a guy like Roy that can play both spots. Again, Ennis, I guess, nearly had an interception, got beat a couple of times. Rock Ya-Sin also was out there as the outside cornerback. And when it comes to special teams, it sounds like the starters at gunner right now on special teams are Rock Ya-Sin and Ennis Rakestraw. Like, those are the guys getting the nod, which if Rock Ya-Sin does get corner 5, which it feels like early now, just based on snaps, he had the interception. He's got a leg up to be corner 5. I mean, that's an open competition. There's no Gavin Holmes right now. Stanley Thomas Oliver, we've only seen clips. It feels like he gets beat every clip. Maybe throw a good clip at Thomas Oliver there. Dang, Lions, y'all making him look bad. All right, maybe do something like that. Rock Ya-Sin's pedigree, of course, is high second-round pick as well, and he fits stylistically really well for the Lions.
My belief is right now that it's Rock Ya-Sin and Khalil Dorsey kind of at the top of that next battle. But I do think there is a lot of talent with those younger guys. I like Gavin Holmes a lot. I think there's real talent within those groups to surprise some people. But those two guys feel like they have the nod right now.
Special teams. Brad Detroit said Strickland and Grant Stewart were the personal protectors. Now, we call that the shield or one personal protector. It's different in the NFL, though. But listing those guys as personal protectors, those guys that are lined up in front of the punter, those two pieces that they're saying are holding it down. Lawrence Strickland, we saw him on some clips. I didn't really hear much about him, but I'm a big Lawrence Strickland guy. And then Grant Stewart that dude's built to be a special teamer. And I don't want to say that sounds bad, but he's built to play well on special teams. He plays a ton of snaps. He played like 350 snaps last year. But the thing about that, too, is Grant Stewart is coming in immediately after losing a guy like Reese Maben. And Reese Maben would be a key cog for us as well. And we got a lot of those dudes now. Craig Reynolds, Sione Vaki was key for us. Tim Twentyman pointed out that both Isaac Ukwu and Ahmed were both guys that kind of flashed for him specifically. Apparently, Ahmed would have had a near sack if Kyle Allen was trying to take a shot, and Ahmed would have sacked him. Now, the thing about that is Ahmed can go. Ahmed's got juice. He's got straight line speed. He's got a burst to his game. He's got some suddenness, and that'll be our next, breakdown is Ahmed. I'm working on it right now, but he's pretty sudden at the top of his rush. And I just imagine, like, if you got him on a twist or a stunt, you just got him going downhill, that's going to be a wrecking ball. Like in some ways, kind of like Josh Pascal, but I think even more so because he can get straight. I think a lot faster straight line. And he's got that juice where that dude is going to be a four, and he's so powerful in the upper body and he jolts guys. I just think I envision that as being the play that he's talking about. Like this dude had a stunt, he got inside, and he was just in a straight line, he's ready to run over Kyle Allen. Some of the inside wins weren't as consistent back in college, but he always had good recognition, and he had that ability to play really short spaces, which showed his agility. So ultimately there, sounds great. I'm glad that's happening, and I'm excited to get to this Ahmed video. But Ukwu as well apparently was living in the backfield, and the Lions have a lot of that. Nate Lynn, there's a lot of that this year. We're excited to see. I'm pumped to see how that plays out. I'm really optimistic about Nate Lynn. He needs to add that element. Ukwu's consistency and his ability to play the run and his body type to do that, it lines him up really well to be a stylistic fit. How dominant can he be is really the big question that I would have there when it comes to him. And then from a highlights perspective, we didn't really get much. Some of these were like replays, but the few highlights that we did get is we got like a kind of a speed to power move by Hutch that was cut off a little bit. So we at least got to see that happen. We also got to see a pass that looked like it missed J-Mo, and DJ Reed dropped the interception with Zach Cunningham just barreling down. In the game, he would have probably got lit up there, but Cunningham can really move in traffic. It looked like J-Mo took his eyes off it, and he just kind of short-armed it, and that led to a dropped interception by DJ. I'd like to see him finish those. He doesn't have a ton of career interceptions. I'd like to see him finish those. And then again, the Gibbs pass that was over the shoulder was beautiful to see. We also have Vontae Maggs working some, with Amik Robertson and kind of their indie drills. I think that's everything in terms of the takeaways that we have today. I'm sure there's other notes out there that people have given, and shout out to them for those. Shout out to those sources for today's notes. And with that being said, the last thing I'll leave it on is Dan Campbell said that, we have OTAs set for Miami, which I believe is going to be in Detroit, and it's a few days, and then one day with the Houston Texans. So we do have those lined up as a couple of OTA practices, and I know that Texas coach has talked about it, D'Amico Ryans, which honestly, I don't want to sound like, I'm biased because we know now, but like, if you ask me, like, what would be the best team to go against and like, just like getting fired up and getting NFL energy before the NFL season starts, Houston's got to be top of that list. That team plays so fast. I love what D'Amico Ryans is doing. I love watching that team play. They were a handful last season. That is like as good as it gets. Good on good. That's as good as it gets. And they're talented. They're young. They are loaded at receiver. The challenge they're going to have on our young guys, like that's going to be an amazing matchup. I'm fired up for that. That's fantastic. And then the Dolphins. No, I don't want to do the Dolphins like that. But hey, all right. We're gonna leave it there, man. I appreciate y'all joining, y'all checking out this episode. And of course, we'll be back on Monday.